for me personally, it's just so awesome to see John grow into that character rather than just see it right off the bat. A lot of the disciples are like that. Simon is not Peter yet. You know, he's still Simon. And so he has to grow into that. And we see every single disciple growing into that.
Thank you so much for talking to us, George.
My pleasure.
You played John in The Chosen. Can you talk a little bit about your character and if you relate to your character at all, how you do that?
Yeah, well, one thing that we always say is that they've cast so well because every one of the actors feels like their disciple in some way. So you can get little clues. The writers have done such a good job, Dallas, Tyler, and Ryan. And I've had this conversation with them where, you know, they look at the book, and with a lot of the other disciples, maybe that don't have books, you kind of have to do research. I'm guessing go really, really deep. With John, there's not only great research you can use, but you can look at the book and see like, oh, okay, so his only one book refers to John as the beloved disciple, and it's his own. So maybe he was quite sure of himself, quite confident. We know that Salome, his mum, asked James and John to be seated at either side of Jesus. So he had a very proud mum who wanted her sons to be as good as possible. So we've got a very eager student, let's just say, and he's always saying he's the first. He was first at the tomb. He's in his book. He's very, very, clear to say that. So from all of that, you can kind of gauge enough about John. He lives to 85 years old. Jesus did consider him one of his leaders, but he wasn't like that at the start. We can kind of put the pieces together, and he was one of the younger disciples, so we can kind of put the pieces together and say that, look, he was emotional, he was impetuous, maybe a bit impatient, but ultimately became one of the biggest leaders, in the Christian church. So I take bits and pieces of myself for that. George can be a bit impatient, and so, I can be emotional and stuff, but ultimately I'm trying to do the right thing. So when Jesus kind of, sees this in John and says, maybe, you need to have faith a little bit more and you need to calm down a little bit. Sometimes it's a bit of catharsis and a little bit of like therapy for the actor, because I'm like, yeah, maybe whereas I can bring my own, maybe some anxieties from my own life into John and power his anxious scenes, I can also take John's calm that he gets, that he's learning off Jesus, and take that into my own life. But it's also a great character arc for John. He does become the beloved disciple, famously being pictured on Jesus, resting his head on Jesus' shoulder. But it's not fun, like, to see that happen from the start. He needs to get to there. So John has started kind of a little bit raring to go in the episode with the miracle of the fish. He's sprinting, wanting to get to that boat as quick as possible, so he starts off very kind of agitated and anxious, but he ends up being calm and serene. So that journey is something I'm so eager to play.
Oh, wow, yes. Can you talk a little bit about how The Chosen introduces Jesus to people who may not have known him, or who do not know him?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because there are two ways in which you can introduce Jesus to people who don't know him. The first way is the show isn't called The Jesus, I always say. It's called The Chosen. So it's the perspective of Jesus from those who knew him best. So you can get, instead of getting the one depiction of Jesus looking out, you're getting at least 12 disciples plus Mary Magdalene, plus all others getting an opinion looking in. So you're getting, at times, 14, 15 different perspectives and storylines. The second way is the way that we depict Jesus as through humor, through familiarity. I always pick this scene, again, the miracle of the fish, when Simon falls to his knees and he looks up at Jesus saying, you are, the Lord, what do you want me to do? And Dallas told me this on that day. He kind of comes to me and goes, I'm worried about this scene. I go, why? He goes, because I'm making the decision. It might be controversial, but I'm going to have Jesus come down to Simon's level instead of standing above him. And so Jesus is saying, I'm on your level. I'm with you. And I think our audience is able to see him as an ordinary person, but at the same time, marvel, obviously, at what he's saying, as the Messiah, as God. And so, yeah, I think the familiarity that the show promotes helps everybody understand the words like they never have before.
Right, right. What has been your greatest challenge, would you say?
Greatest challenge? Look, I would love to have like a deep like answer, but with the show we have incredible like different weather. I would say sometimes it's really cold, sometimes it's really hot, and I love talking about this sort of stuff because as an actor, it's things that you don't learn in acting school. Like they don't
Right.
send you to sub-zero temperatures and go act like it's hot,
Right.
but not only act like it's hot, but then also care about something.
Right.
So that's been a huge challenge on the show. I know Austin, who plays Nathaniel, who does a great job. There's a scene where he's literally freezing, like things on him are freezing and they have to constantly touch him up, and he has to be under that tree and have that big moment where he's surrendering finally in his life, and letting go of his old life. And he has to do all that whilst it's like freezing temperatures.
Right.
So all of us have to kind of deal with like different weather and different climates and stuff. So I don't know, for me that's been really, really challenging, but so much fun because it kind of gives you abs, like acting abs, I call them.
Yes, yes. And what are you most excited about in season 3?
I love John's arc. Like I said, the image of John right at the end is this beloved disciple, but right now he's not. He's young, he's impetuous, he's impatient, and so I love that in this season we do get a bit of that. The season on a whole is that disciples getting sent out 2 by 2 after the Sermon on the Mount, and they're preaching the words of Jesus, and some people don't quite like that in terms of like the Gentiles that they approach, and it causes a bit of a stir. So they've got a little bit of cleaning up to do, let's just say. But as a kind of sidebar, John is learning that he has to be patient, and everything can't happen at once. And that's, for me personally, it's just so awesome to see John grow into that character rather than just see it right off the bat. A lot of the disciples are like that. Simon is not Peter yet. He's still Simon, and so he has to grow into that. And we see every single disciple growing into that. Like we've got Thomas, known as the doubter. Why is that the case? How does he grow in from the end of season 2 to the end of season 3? And then obviously we've got the feeding of the 5,000 as well happening. So yeah, lots to look forward to in this season.
Forward to, definitely. What will audiences experience as they watch season 3?
So we end season 2 of with the Sermon on the Mount, and it's basically the message of I will take everybody in. I'm preaching this message to everybody, and so we are seeing that melting pot. And I think it's such an important message because Jesus was someone who was preaching to everybody, and we see that because this season sprawls so much. The disciples and Jesus travel all over, and I love that message, and I love that there are some issues, like there are some obstacles that they approach on the way, but literally you can't have a stronger visual of everybody than literally seeing 5,000 extras in front of a camera, not CGI, 5,000 people from all over the world who are as humans watching Jesus, but in the story, they are coming from all over Judea and the world to listen to this man. It's like this. It's a bit meta, isn't it? Because it's people listening to an actor perhaps, but it's also characters listening to Jesus in the show. I think that's just one thing that really, really stands out to me.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.